whichever time you're watching this. Hello, it's James. Today, we're tackling bread again. We're going with some bread. A loaf that I am a big fan of is Cottage Loaf. A cottage loaf is basically a loaf and then like a little loaf on top of it. It looks like a little cottage. We're going to be using though, and that is Heygates flour. Getting hold of bread flour has been a bit of a nightmare over the lockdown, so I ordered this 16 kilo bag from Heygates. Heygates is a flour mill from my home village in Budbrook, Northamptonshire. And my old man works there. Him. That's him, Ian Gordon. Not that he sorted me out with this, I had to buy this on Amazon myself. I purchased, paid for delivery, all on myself, because I'm a big boy now. We're going to be using Heygates flour, bread flour, to make our loaf. And then also, it's a cast iron Dutch oven. We're going to be using this to cook it in. I found that this will just give it such an amazing crust. We're using yeast, we're not using a sourdough starter, so it should be quite straightforward. Not saying anything, okay? Don't try and pin me to this part of the clip later on when I'm crying because it's all gone wrong. It's not going to go wrong, it's going to go fine, okay? The cottage loaf part of this is purely down to shape. This recipe for bread will get you a great tin loaf, rounded shaped boule, or even bread rolls. We're starting off with a 7-gram packet of dried yeast. To this, we'll measure out 250 grams of warm water, then a level tablespoon of sugar. It might seem like quite a lot of sugar, but it's going to help activate the yeast. Give this all a good mix together and let it do its thing for 15 minutes. The yeast will bloom and you'll end up with a lovely frothy soup. Then in a large plastic bowl, the plastic is better, it'll help control the temperature of your dough. We're going to measure out 500 grams of bread flour, cue the excited on the mark noise, boop, and 15 grams of salt. Give that a little mix together with your hand, and then make a little well in the middle. Into the well we're going to pour our yeasty soup, and start mixing it all together. Use your hands. The more you make dough, you'll come to feel when it's the right consistency to start kneading. Add a little more warm water if you think the dough is too dry. You want it to look like a shaggy ball, but not too wet. Then we get down to kneading. Knead for speed. I'd say you want to knead for about 8 to 10 minutes. It'll be a smooth ball which when you give a little prod should bounce back. If it does bounce back, that means the gluten has built up in your dough. Bring back your bowl, oil it up a little and pop in your dough ball. Cover it with some cling film which you've also oiled just so it doesn't stick when it's rising, and leave it for a couple of hours or until it's doubled in size, and you'll be left with this bad boy. Look at that nice little air bubble that we've ended up with. Always nice to play with your food, isn't it? Especially like this. Now you need to knock back your dough. Knocking out the dough will just get rid of any big bubbles. Just knead it for a couple of minutes and then we're going to start shaping the loaf. Using a sharp knife, cut off a third of the dough so that you have a big ball and a little ball. We want them to be as round as possible, so you're going to tuck the dough underneath itself and turn it like this until you've got a smooth ball. You want to turn the dough with both hands, almost like you're turning a wheel, pushing the sides under as you go. Take out your piece of baking paper, lightly flour it, and then we're going to build a snowman. Put on your first big ball and then the little ball on top. Using a slightly dampened thumb, push down all the way through the middle, fusing the balls together, leaving you with a classic cottage loaf shape. Make sure that when you're pushing your thumb through, it goes all the way through and hits the work surface at the bottom. Pop your bowl over the top of the loaf and we're going to let it go for its second rise. Just give it about an hour, hour and a half. It should have doubled in size and it'll come out looking a little bit like this. Well, hopefully not like this, not all floppy and fallen at one side. I don't know why it's done that. Now, using a sharp knife, we're going to put some slits into the side and we're going to give the bread a quick egg wash. This will give it a great colour. We're off to the oven. Put on your oven at 220 degrees or gas mark 7 and let the casserole dish heat up for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then take off the lid, lower your loaf in on the baking sheet and pop the lid back on. Let it cook like this for about 20 minutes. The lid being on will trap steam, which will keep the crust soft, meaning your bread will expand nice and big. When the 20 minutes is over, take the lid off and give it another 15 minutes just to really crust up the crust. When the time is up, take out your loaf. It should be a deep golden brown colour, and when you tap the bottom, it will sound hollow. Now, my loaf did flop over slightly, which is a shame, but it's still going to be a great bread. I'm going to be eating my bacon sandwiches with it, and I'm going to be a very happy boy. That's a cottage loaf. Well, I say it's a cottage loaf. It's not necessarily a cottage loaf. Usually, you'd have a very defined little boule on top of your loaf. With this, it sort of all seemed to sink into it. Oh, it smells lovely. Make sure you let it cool down completely, because I think I cut this a little bit too soon and all the heat left the middle of it and it sort of left it a little bit spongy in the middle. But the cast iron Dutch oven gives it like, I mean, that's a cottage loaf. Try it yourself. It's just a slightly different way of doing a bit of bread if you're bored of just making bread in the normal way. Like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.